Hello everyone, my name is Kim Siddons. In today's video podcast lesson, we'll discuss Mayer's multimedia principles, specifically the coherence principle. We'll define the principle, give you some examples of it in application, and hopefully you'll come away with an appreciation of how to use it when you design, develop, and deploy your own lessons. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. When designing lessons that incorporate multimedia, it's important to consider Mayer's multimedia principles, 6 strategies on how to integrate text, graphics, and video in the most effective manner without adversely affecting learning. Now to the subject of today's lesson, the coherence principle and its definition. Simply stated, one should avoid using gratuitous visuals, text, or sounds in lessons that utilize multimedia, as they tend to adversely affect learning. Now let's take a look at the psychology, the rationale behind the coherence principle. What are some of the reasons you think gratuitous video, text, and sounds hurt learning? Some of the reasons you probably thought of include distracting from the central content of the lesson, interfering with the learner's organization of data, and prompting unrelated prior knowledge. Now let's look at an example. You're in a class that's studying volcanoes, specifically the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens, and the teacher uses the following multimedia slide in class. Now, as you see, this slide includes 2 different sized photos, one of Mount St. Helens erupting and another depicting what's known as the Ring of Fire, an area known for volcanic activity. Additionally, there are 4 bulleted points, 2 that are emphasized using animations. And finally, there's a statement regarding volcanoes in Italy and Hawaii. This leads us to ask you, the viewer, 2 questions. First, using the coherence principle, what's wrong with the slide you just saw? And second, what would you suggest to improve the slide in concert with the coherence principle? Things that you might have considered include the Ring of Fire picture, which is irrelevant to the Mount St. Helens eruption, as well as the fancy animation that, while entertaining, simply distracts. And finally, the volcano information from Italy and Hawaii, which is unrelated to the subject at hand. Additionally, there's simply too much information for one slide, making it hard for the learner to digest and move information to long-term memory. So now, how can we improve the slide applying the coherence principle? That's right. Eliminate the gratuitous multimedia, the extra photo, the bullet animation, and the unrelated volcano information. So now let's see what an improved example would look like. Applying the suggested corrections, we're down to 1 photo of Mount St. Helens erupting and 4 appropriate bullets that describe elements of the devastating event. It's clean and uncluttered, emphasizing the key points of the lesson without the distractions of unnecessary visuals, text, and sounds. So let's review the tenets of the coherence principle. How do you define the principle? Stop the video to review and recite the definition to yourself, and restart it again to compare your answer. That's correct. The definition is avoid the use of gratuitous visuals, text, and sound as it negatively impacts learning, or words to that effect. Given the definition, what are some of the reasons the coherence principle is valid? Stop the video to review and recite some of the reasons to yourself, and restart it again to compare your answer. Your response should include the fact that gratuitous visuals, text, and sounds distract the learner from the central focus of the lesson, interfere with learners' organization of information, and stimulate unrelated prior knowledge, all of which hurts learning. As we wrap up today's lesson, one final thought. Did you notice any violations of the coherence principle in this lesson? This completes Lesson 1 of a 6-part video podcast series on Mayer's multimedia principles. Join us next time when we discuss the redundancy principle. Until then, I'm Kem Siddons for FSU's Instructional Systems program. Have a great week.